19-year-old Karmelo Anthony sentenced to 35 years in prison for fatally stabbing 17-year-old Austin Metcalf at a track meet. Metcalf's father delivering an emotional victim impact statement saying, quote, "We were robbed. This was never about race. It is about right and wrong. My son's death destroyed the person I used to be."
Austin Metcalf went to a track meet on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. He was 17 years old, a junior at Frisco Memorial High School in Texas, a student athlete who had competed at Kuykendall Stadium before, just like hundreds of other kids who showed up that day from schools across the Frisco Independent School District. April 2nd, 2025. A normal competition day. Coaches setting up tents in the bleachers. Athletes warming up on the track below. Families finding seats. Rain starting to fall. Austin was there with his team. His twin brother Hunter was there too. Same tent, same bleachers, same day. They did not know that a teenager from a rival school had walked under their team's tent to get out of the rain. They did not know he had a weapon on him. When Austin approached and asked the boy to leave, the situation escalated fast. Words were exchanged. The stranger reached into his bag. He looked directly at Austin and said 5 words. "Touch me and see what happens." Nobody believed him. Seconds later, Austin Metcalf was on the ground, stabbed in the heart with a pocketknife. His brother Hunter was right there. A coach ripped off his own jacket and pressed it against the wound. First responders rushed in. CPR was performed on the wet stadium ground. Austin never regained consciousness. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. The boy who stabbed him, Karmelo Anthony, was arrested at the scene. On a police officer's body camera, he told investigators exactly what he had done. He said, "I'm not alleged. I did it. Welcome to this crime unseen." Today's case, the murder of Austin Metcalf and the trial that ended in a verdict no one had to wait long for. This channel is built for people who want the full story, not the headlines, not the noise. If you are watching for the first time, subscribe right now. We cover cases like this every week and we always go deeper. Now let's get into it. To understand what happened at Kuykendall Stadium, you have to understand the 2 boys at the centre of it, because they were strangers. They had never met before April 2nd, 2025. They did not run in the same circles. They did not go to the same school. They had no history, no conflict, no reason to cross paths. Austin Metcalf was 17 years old, a junior at Frisco Memorial High School. He was a track athlete, competitive, driven, part of a team that showed up to that stadium to compete. By all accounts from people who knew him, Austin was direct. If something was wrong, he said something. That was his nature. And on the day he was killed, he did exactly that. He saw someone sitting under his school's team tent who did not belong there, and he said something. Karmelo Anthony was also 17 at the time, a student at Frisco Centennial High School, also there for the same district-wide track meet. At some point during the competition, as the rain picked up, Anthony left his school's designated area and ended up under the Memorial High School tent. Witnesses testified that there were roughly 20 people under that tent at the time, a mix of students, athletes, boys and girls, and that Anthony appeared to know at least one person already seated there. That detail matters, because the defence would later argue that Anthony had a reason to be there, that he was not intruding, he was simply trying to stay dry. The prosecution's position was different. Anthony was in the wrong place. He was confronted about it, and rather than leave, he made a decision that took a life. These 2 teenagers, from different schools, from different worlds, who had never spoken before that afternoon, were about to collide in a way that would leave one of them dead and the other facing the rest of his youth behind bars. By the early afternoon of April 2nd, 2025, the track meet at Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco was well underway. Multiple schools from the Frisco Independent School District were competing. Each team had a designated tent area in the bleachers, a base for athletes, coaches, and supporters throughout the day. The rain that afternoon created a problem. Students who were not competing at that moment had fewer places to shelter. Some moved toward tents that were not their own. That is the context the defense would point to repeatedly during the trial. That moving around was normal, that tent lines were informal, that no clear rule was being broken. But witnesses told a different story about what happened specifically under the memorial tent. Austin Metcalf and others had asked Karmelo Anthony multiple times to leave. Not once, multiple times. The confrontation did not begin with a punch or a shove. It began with repeated requests and a refusal. At some point during the escalating exchange, Anthony reached into a bag he was carrying. He issued what became the most debated 5 words of the entire trial. "Touch me and see what happens." The prosecution called it a threat. The defense called it a warning. That distinction would define everything that followed. What happened next was captured on stadium surveillance cameras. Forensic video analyst Mark Porter, the prosecution's first witness, walked the jury through footage from multiple cameras positioned around Kuykendall Stadium. The quality was grainy. Software was used to enhance and zoom in, but the image degraded significantly under magnification. The footage did not give the jury a clean, clear view of the moment itself. What it did show was the sequence of events building toward it. Austin Metcalf was stabbed once, in the chest, with a pocketknife. The blade reached his heart. A coach nearby reacted immediately, pulling off his own jacket and applying direct pressure to the wound. That jacket, still bearing the evidence of what happened that afternoon, was brought into court on the first day of testimony. Prosecutors displayed it to the jury as their final exhibit before adjournment, a deliberate choice. Leave that image with the jury overnight. First responder Neil Adams, a Frisco firefighter paramedic, testified that he drove his ambulance directly to where Austin was lying on the ground. He ordered nearby tents moved to give his team a clear space to work. When they reached Austin, he had no pulse. He never regained consciousness. He was 17 years old. If you are following this case with us, subscribe to This Crime Unseen right now. We cover cases like this every single week, and we always go deeper than the headlines. Karmelo Anthony did not run. He was arrested at Kuykendall Stadium shortly after the stabbing. Frisco police officer Eduardo Cortez was among the first officers on scene. Cortez later testified about what happened when Anthony was taken into custody. In body camera footage played for the jury, Anthony can be heard telling officers 4 words that became one of the most significant pieces of evidence in the entire case. "I'm not alleged. I did it." The prosecution presented that statement as proof of intent. This was not a confession extracted under pressure. It was a direct, unprompted acknowledgement, spoken by a teenager who had just stabbed someone and was now being processed at the scene. The defense attempted to reframe it. On cross-examination, defense attorney Mike Howard asked Officer Cortez whether Anthony had been emotional while in the squad car. Cortez hesitated, then answered yes. The defense wanted the jury to see a frightened teenager, not a calculating one, but prosecutor Bill Werski addressed that directly. He noted that once Anthony was seated in the squad car, he was cool, calm, and collected. Not the behaviour, Werski argued, of someone who had genuinely feared for their life moments earlier. In June 2025, a Collin County grand jury formally indicted Anthony on a charge of first-degree murder. He was released on bond and placed under house arrest. He remained there for more than a year while his case moved through the system. During that time, the case became national news. Judge John Roach imposed a strict gag order, restricting attorneys, witnesses, and investigators from making public statements. He barred electronics from the courtroom entirely because of the level of attention the case had attracted. Outside the Collin County Courthouse in McKinney during jury selection on June 1st, 2026, competing crowds gathered, some supporting Anthony, others demanding justice for Austin Metcalf. The judge made his position clear from the start. None of that would enter his courtroom. Inside, 4 days of testimony were about to begin that would force 12 jurors to decide one question. Was Karmelo Anthony a teenager who acted in fear, or a teenager who chose to use a weapon he should never have brought to a school competition? Jury selection began June 1st, 2026, at the Collin County Courthouse in McKinney, Texas. What followed was 4 days of testimony, 9-hour sessions, a Saturday session included, 40-minute lunch breaks, 10-minute afternoon breaks. The pace was relentless from the first morning. The prosecution called 21 witnesses. Their case was constructed in deliberate layers: physical evidence first, then eyewitness testimony, then the forensic and medical findings that made the self-defense argument extremely difficult to maintain. The first witness was forensic video analyst Mark Porter, who walked jurors through surveillance footage from multiple camera angles at Kuykendall Stadium. Grainy, imperfect, but it established the sequence. It placed Anthony at the tent. It showed the confrontation developing. It showed the moment the situation changed. Then came the first responders. Paramedic Neil Adams described arriving to find Austin with no pulse. A coach's jacket, used to apply pressure to Austin's wound, was displayed to the jury at the close of day 1. Prosecutors left it there deliberately before adjournment. Teenage eyewitnesses took the stand on day 2. Several broke down while testifying. They described the tent, crowded, tense, rain falling outside, voices rising. They described Anthony reaching into his bag. They described Austin being stabbed and the chaos that erupted around them. Then came the medical examiner. Collin County Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Elizabeth Ventura testified on day 3. Judge Roach warned the courtroom before she began. Austin's family left the room before her testimony started. Dr. Ventura told the jury that Austin Metcalf had been stabbed through the heart. She described the wound as gaping, 2.5 inches in length. She testified it was not survivable. The prosecution also demonstrated for the jury how quickly Anthony's pocketknife could be opened. This was not an accident. This was not hesitation. This was a fast, deliberate motion. The defense called 3 witnesses. Their argument rested on 2 points: that Austin Metcalf had no legal right to physically remove Anthony from the tent, and that Anthony acted in a split second of fear after being shoved, not out of premeditation or intent to kill. Defense attorney Mike Howard told the jury that Texas law does not require a person to wait until they are hit before defending themselves. He asked 12 people to put themselves inside that moment. A teenager, surrounded, being told to leave, feeling physically threatened with no way out. Prosecutor Werski's rebuttal was precise and short. This is not self-defense. It is murder. Plain and simple. You do not get to meet a shove with a stab, especially if you provoked the shove. Closing arguments ended on the morning of June 9th, 2026. The jury was sequestered and sent to deliberate. 2 hours and 20 minutes later, they came back. Karmelo Anthony stood as Judge John Roach Jr. read the verdict. Guilty of murder. Austin's twin brother Hunter Metcalf was in the courtroom for the first time. He had not testified during the trial. He sat in the front row with his parents, Jeff and Megan Metcalf, and leaned forward as that word was spoken. Anthony dropped his head. His attorney placed an arm around him and held it there. The penalty phase began within the hour. The defense called 1 witness, Anthony's mother. She was on the stand within 30 minutes of her son being found guilty. Attorney Howard asked her one question. Did she believe her son regretted what he had done? She said yes. She said she loved her son. She said he was very, very sorry. Prosecutor Werski's response was brief. He looked at her and acknowledged that she was grieving as any mother would. Then he said she would still be able to see her son. The jury understood what was left unsaid. Austin Metcalf's family would not have that. The jury deliberated on sentencing for another 2 hours and 20 minutes. They rejected the sudden passion argument that would have capped Anthony's sentence at 20 years. Under the murder conviction, they came back with 35 years in Texas state prison. Karmelo Anthony is 19 years old. He will not be eligible for parole until he has served at least half of that sentence. He will be in his mid-30s at the earliest. Austin Metcalf was 17 years old. He went to a track meet on a Wednesday. He was stabbed by a stranger he had never met before that afternoon. He never came home. If this case stayed with you, you are exactly who this crime unseen was built for. We do not just cover crimes. We follow the evidence, the people, and the truth wherever it leads. Subscribe so you never miss a case. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the verdict? Was 35 years the right sentence? We read every single one.